Hello, this will be a book review of The Setting Sun by Osamu Dazai. Osamu Dazai was the first Japanese author I read when I started branching out from American fiction. I'm sure many others share that experience from being influenced online and with him being one of the only Japanese writers stocked at the local Barnes & Nobles. I'm not well versed in the history of Japanese literature. By no definition am I an expert. I'll just be sharing my opinions and what I walked away with from my most recent read in this video. I first experienced Dazai with No Longer Human, his most famous work. Then I tried out Life of a Beggar Student, and most recently, The Setting Sun, and I plan to read more of his work in the future, if I can. They all come in the form of the popular I novel, and they all draw inspiration from his real life, which is a common trend you'll see in novels from the land of the rising sun. I enjoy his simple yet eloquent style. In reading Kobata, I found their style the most similar, while Murakami does not follow the literary traditions of his country. These are just other Japanese authors I've read. I do want to branch out from just these three and the mangakas I'm familiar with, but so far when it comes to Japanese works, I've stuck with. Shuji Tsushima was born June 19, 1909, and he died by suicide in June 1948. He and his lover threw themselves into an aqueduct by his house and were discovered on what would have been his 39th birthday. Osamu Dazai was a pen name he chose, possibly to distance himself from his family's respected reputation. I'll skip past an in-depth bio section here, since it would be better fitting for an essay on No Longer Human, which is a semi-autobiographical work in itself. He has steadily become revered both inside and now outside of his native country, decades after his death. Published in 1947, The Setting Sun focuses on a woman named Kazuko. She's still settling into adulthood and struggles with her family's fall into poverty from a higher class of nobility, especially with the loss of family members and the strife her brother brings to her life. While it centers on her perspective, the story fluidly transitions to flashbacks throughout the years of her adolescence to the current day where she is soon to be turning 30. We get glimpses into her brother, Naju's, perspective through letters, and we see her heart laid bare in the same epistolary style towards the end of the novel. To put it simply, this book is surprisingly a delight to read. Even when darker aspects of life are explored, the language is lush and there is a pessimistic hope emanating through the pages. Kazuko is constantly distraught, yet imagines her life going in directions no one else around her can picture. Perhaps my plans will come to magnificent flowering like some gigantic chrysanthemum. Dazai aimed to capture the desperation of post-World War II Japan, and did so with vibrant imagery that asks the reader to fully empathize with the characters being depicted. It is a shorter read at only 175 pages, and the chapters fly right by. While there is an overarching plot, the main draw is the emotional depth that is explored in our protagonist and her grappling with the adversities of life. I found this a bit less depressing than No Longer Human. Even though the content is similar, Kazuko's desire for change creates an entirely different atmosphere. The choice of a female protagonist confounded me at first. Apparently the work is based on a lover Dazai had and the letters she'd sent to him. I wonder how closely the letters contained in the novel are to what he was actually sent. In the first chapter, we see the motif of snakes and flowers being implanted. I had the feeling that the ugly snake dwelling in my breast might one day end by devouring this beautiful, grief-stricken mother snake. Kazuko and her mother live alone in a country house after selling their lavish family home in Tokyo. Her father had died a decade earlier. Since then, her brother Dazai has gone missing during the war. He struggled with drug use at home, then got addicted to opium in the war, which he referred to as Japan's act of desperation, and he eventually returns to them. The mother and daughter have a fair relationship, but it is not without strain. Kazuko feels as if she lacks her mother's aristocratic nature. This becomes all the more real when she's admonished for burning snake eggs and is made to feel like a crude woman. Briefly, we learn of the snake that appeared in their old home when her father passed. Apparently, a snake was wrapped around every tree in their yard as well. Ever since, her mother has marked them as a bad omen. This becomes a running motif alongside the sporadic description of their garden. These motifs make Dazai's goal clear. In writing this novel, he was trying to depict life as he saw it. Our characters adjust to radical cultural shifts, finding death to be ever-present, a modern reliance on substances, and a remarkable absence of love. When moving, her mother said, "I'm going to Izu because you are with me, because I have you." Throughout the novel, Kazuko questions her mother's true intentions. Later, when her brother returns, she feels as though he was all her mother lived for. Of course, the biggest issue Kazuko has to contend with is living in a lower class than what she was raised in. For the first time in my life, I realized what a horrible, miserable, salvationless hell it is to be without money. As they deplete their wealth, a slow death eats at them, as their social standing and health decay with the passing years. Death and suicide are constantly mentioned with a unique cavalierness. After Kazuku carelessly starts a fire, she has to pay her neighbors and ask for their forgiveness, which she earns since the mistake did not result in any serious damages. Not even my suicide could have served as sufficient apology, and my death would not only have caused mothers, but have blackened forever my father's name. It may be a bit of an exaggeration, or it may be hitting at a major cultural difference. I'll say that Dazai illustrates an existence that accepts death with a comfortability devoid of fear. In their last conversation, Mother tells Kazuku, speaking on understanding the world, "We all remain children. No matter how much time goes by, we don't understand anything." Her son treats her coldly, yet cries with his sister by her bedside before the last lady in Japan passed away. The snake returned just as her mother expected, but Kazuku concealed the fact. Afterwards, Kazuku throws herself into exploring the world outside her house, while Najai works as publisher with his mentor. That is until he takes his own life and leaves a testament to explain why. "It's no use. I'm going. I'm better off dead. I haven't the capacity to stay alive." And with him, the aristocracy dies, at least for Kazuku and for the sake of the novel and what it symbolizes for a failing class structure. This epistolary chapter encapsulates the theme and provides a chance to explore a character that haunts the narrative from the very beginning. Najai and Mr. Uehara are obviously the characters Dazai projects onto. Not to say that he doesn't put himself into Kazuku as well, it's just that the suicidal and addictive struggles that dominated his life are on exhibit through these two. Since man could conceive of altered states of consciousness and taking one's own life, we've been doing it. One could tire themselves out for eternity debating whether any person should be allowed to do either one. Yet the actions themselves persist all the same. Across cultures, people drink recreationally, certain psychoactive substances are more popular than others, and each has had their time being demonized. In my view, alcohol seems to escape criticism simply because it is widely legal, baked into nightlife, and is comparatively less likely to develop a dependence in a user. In a scene where Kazuku goes to a bar in Tokyo, Mr. Uehara says to her, "I drink out of desperation. Life is too dreary to endure. The misery, loneliness, crampedness, the heartbreaking. Whenever you can hear the gloomy sighs of woe from the four walls around you, you know that there's not a chance of happiness existing just for you. What feelings do you suppose a man has when he realizes that he will never know happiness or glory as long as he lives? Hard work? All that amounts to is food for the wild beast of hunger. There are too many pitiful people." Here, a growing sense of despair seems to be punctuated by all that had occurred in the recent decade. Hope has left the stage, leaving only the option to keep struggling without clear purpose, or at least in the mind of this prototypical salaryman who detests his life. Kazuku's own response seems to contain the faltering feeling of love she has for him, which I'll get into in just a while. If one sees the world as a series of tragic events, where the only respite comes in the form of a psychological high, what is the reason to keep on going along with the way things are? In that heart-wrenching suicide note, Kazuku reads, in the penultimate chapter, her brother says, "We have become impoverished. Why must I go on living after what has happened? It's useless. I'm going to die. I have a poison that kills without pain. And my drunkenness from last night has entirely worn off. I shall die sober. Once more, goodbye, Kazuku." Ideating, suicide, and substances. Is that all it comes down to? Everyone drinks to stay alive from what Kazuku witnesses. Through a personal connection, she learns that it is a way to cope with all the negative experiences they have been put through. As I read, I kept on thinking how suicide is such a passing thought for these people. After a country loses a war, such a gruesome war, trauma and guilt must rack the civilians without discretion. A noticeable increase in the use of recreational substances dominating a society could be seen as a reaction. Maybe it's the pursuit to numb people's emotions for even just a brief period. Kazuku expresses a range of emotion throughout the novel, yet is hesitant to approach love. As for love, no. Having once written that word, I can write nothing more. In addition to this lack of love, there are hardly any men present in her life. Her father has passed, brother lost, and an uncle who supports them from afar. She's stuck in an unenviable position without a way to help herself. She's been divorced, experienced a stillborn, and lost most of her loved ones. Dazai depicts how easily one can fall from a higher class and find themselves in complete desperation. Kazuku and her mother live for years without remarrying, even as their funds dwindle and they both grow lonely. She recounts a chance meeting with a soldier when she worked to support the war effort, and how saddened she was to never see him again. He gave her a book to read and a whole day to rest. They part with a wordless yet very emotional goodbye. Later, she is proposed to and turns the older gentleman down since she wants to marry for love, not convenience. Despite this, she never actively searches for applicable suitors. The last few chapters center on her infatuation with her brother's tutor, who writes novels that she does not care for. She speaks at length about how impressed she is with artists in reference to painters, but she is clear with Mr. Uehara that she is not particularly impressed with his prose. Nonetheless, Kazuku finds herself seeking the company of men, as a woman of this period was to be expected. Yet Dazai writes it as such a natural way of life. That may just be my interpretation, as I see Kazuku explore so many other facets of her personality that grow unhindered by the manic quality of traditional romance. The novel leaves me with the feeling that a survival mindset was instilled in so many during the war, and that love cannot blossom amidst so much strife. It seemed to me then a face of beauty unmatched in the whole world. My breast throbbed with the sensation of resuscitated love. I kissed him as I stroked his hair. This comes after Uehara states how depraved his life has become. Kazuku goes through a range of emotions from revulsion back to her normal infatuation. She seems to accept that love is something that exists in one's mind and resolves to keep her focus on him. I'm happy now. Even if I were to hear the four-wall shriek in anguish, my feeling of happiness would still be at the saturation point. I'm so happy I could sneeze. Over the course of the novel, she comes to these conclusions regarding the meaning of life. We will live in a perpetual struggle with the old morality. Like the sun, in the present world, the most beautiful thing is a victim. Kazuku may be referring to those subjected to an adverse life, or simply the deserted and forgotten people left to loneliness. I think she identifies as a victim, since she did nothing wrong, yet suffered so greatly, and she knows that she's passing it along to the child that she has birthed from Uehara. Dazai's writing style is comprised of a string of introspective emotions and thoughts forming the shape of a life. In the setting sun, his prose feels like a reeling tide that ebbs and flows, which for me was soothing to follow. A terrible emotion, shall I call it an apprehension, wings my heart only to release it, makes my pulse falter, and chokes my breath. Kazuku is put into such a desperate situation with her family. Each one of their deaths alters her life, sending her to what seems like the worst possible outcome for an adult. Yet she comes out of her struggles with a delusional hope to persevere and find things that make her happy. Maybe there's only so long one can go without love. In the pursuit of it, one must love themselves first, which I like to believe Kazuku ends with some semblance of. Man was born for love and revolution. In this review, I didn't get the chance to delve into the political beliefs Dazai explores here. I felt those passages didn't exemplify the aspects I most resonated with. The novel stands on its own as a touch point of a transitional period in Japan and as a personal testament of the author. During his complicated life, Dazai struggled with his mental health, substance use, and toxic romances during a pivotal period and greater moment in history. Reading this novel was a great way to explore that time from a non-Western perspective and start to identify the cultural similarities that occur when a country comes to a great shift in class politics. Forgive me for any mispronunciation throughout this video and for the cobbled together vibe I managed here. I'm still working at figuring out how to use all the software to construct videos. I meant to write a long overdue review of East of Eden, and I had started working on that, but I got sidetracked and ended up making this instead. I did have fun analyzing this text while imbuing it with my own personal insights. Anyways, thanks for watching. Go live and love as much as you can. Until next time.